Hey everyone, welcome to the channel. I'm Jake, and today we have a little bit of this versus that. We have the brand new Axial Coyote, and we also have the, I'll call it the legendary Vanquish stance. The goal of today is I want to talk about both of these trucks in comp form. Now, I personally host competitions at least once or twice a month for all of the local people here. I have two classes that I typically do. It started out with a single class, and that's class 2. There's a few rules for it, but basically it's pretty much wide open. And the rules that are in place are to keep people from having to buy really expensive builds and do things like that. It's really made to be more competitive, so that way we have consistent people coming back. Nobody wants to lose every weekend. The rules are made in such a way that I'm not favoring any vendor or any truck or whatever specifically. What I'm trying to do is favor the drivers, or really make it more of a driver's challenge versus a truck challenge. I think earlier this year, it was brought to my attention by a guy named Rick that we needed to do something to incorporate more people, right? Because building a Class 2 truck and running it, tuning it and tweaking it are, I don't want to say challenging, but it takes a lot of time, and time equals money. So from there, I decided to add another class, and it was really kind of a challenge to determine what to name this class, because I didn't want to name it the beginner class or the novice class or whatever the case is, because people get offended by terminology pretty easily, and I want to include everyone. I named it the basic class. And the basic class started out where you could run two trucks. The first truck you could run was the Red Cat Ascent and the Red Cat Ascent Fusion. I call them a single truck because they're essentially the same thing. One has upgraded electronics and chassis, and then the other one is just pretty much the same thing. The second truck that you can run is the Vanquish stance. Now, the reason that I'm limiting it to these two trucks, I've had a lot of people complain that they can't run their Traxxas TRX4 Sport or their Axial Base Camp or other things like that. And the primary reason for that is that there are two main rules in the basic class. The first rule is you can change the wheels and tires. The second rule is you can change out all of the electronics, and then really the third rule is you can't do anything else. So you have to run the stock body, so you can't manipulate the body in any way. It has to be stock cut. You can paint it, right? You can buy a clear body that's already been cut and pre-cut, if you will, and you can paint that body and apply stickers and whatever else you want to it, but you can't add to or remove from the body. So you can't add scale items and run it. I mean, I'm not going to stop you, right? I'm just throwing it out there that you probably don't want to because it's going to add weight. But as you can see on this stance, we're running everything stock. We're running all the stock electronics from the servo all the way down to everything, really. The ESC and the motor. The only change that we've made on this truck is the wheels and tires, and that's it. So these wheels and tires are Vanquish method wheels with Vanquish V-lock rings, and they do have the brass clamp rings in the front and no brass clamp rings in the rear. Inside of these tires, we're running a set of 3D printed inserts that I designed and printed out. And then, yeah, we're probably running a 2200 Z-Pack in here or a 1500 Z-Pack, depending on how many people are using it. So this is what I call the community stance. So if you're in the Northeast Kansas, Northwest Missouri, Nebraska, whatever area, and you want to compete, and you show up without a truck, maybe you don't have the money to buy a truck, or you haven't decided on the truck you want, you can join my Facebook group, and it's called JAG-Midwest Crawling RC Crawling. Midwest Crawling RC Crawling. There's a lot of crawlings in there. But I post events there. Sometimes it's only a week or two in advance. It really just depends on the schedule. There's a lot going on in everyone's lives. So if you join the group, you don't have a truck, you want to come run in one of the comps, the basic class costs $5 to enter. And again, just like all the other classes, top 3 get the payout of that pot. So yeah, this is the community stance. This is what everyone runs if they don't have a stock stance, because most people will go out and buy one of these trucks and they'll immediately start to do upgrades to it. Now, the interesting thing here, and really the funny thing, is that the first basic class that I held was at a place called Lake Perry here in northeast Kansas. And it's right on Lake Perry, which is in the name, right? And the rocks out there are very different than most of the other rocks we have in this area. They are very abrasive, they're very sandpaper-like, and so I mean, you could go out there with the worst tires in the world, and you're very likely going to find traction with them because of how good the traction on these rocks are. And so the first comp day, we probably had 30 to 40 people show up to run Class 2 in the basic class, and I actually set up the same course for Class 2 in basic. I didn't have enough real estate to set up two different courses, and I also didn't have enough gates. And so I essentially made the course challenging enough that both a stock Red Cat Ascent and stock Stance could do it, but at the same time not have to need a winch or anything like that to be able to complete the course, because there's no winching allowed in the basic class. That's by design. I don't want people to show up and then have to winch 15 times to get through a course. Most people complain about winching, and I get it. The first comp we held, we ran the basic class first, and everybody loved it. It was an immediate hit. Almost everyone, with the exception of a few people, ran this specific community stance here, and we all had the same everything, right? We're running the brushed motor, the 1060 ESC, the VR1 radio, right, with the receiver and the stock servo. I do believe I had these wheels and tires on it at the time. Maybe I had a different set of wheels and tires, but I'm pretty sure it was these. The interesting thing here is that the stock Stance actually was more capable for most people than their actual Class 2 builds. It was actually pretty funny to see the scoring difference between somebody who ran the Stance versus somebody who ran their dedicated Class 2 truck. And the reason that I bring all of this up is because it shows you that we do not put enough time and effort into utilizing what the manufacturer has provided us and making small adjustments to that and going from there, right? We just immediately go to, oh, let's throw 20 pounds of brass on here. We got to upgrade all the electronics. We got to upgrade the suspension. We got to do everything to make it a completely different truck. And it's more than likely going to perform worse than what it did right out of the box. I can attest to it. It's been interesting since we've created the basic class because of the restrictions that it has. And it shows, right? A lot of people really fell in love with the basic class because of that. They don't have to go and try and spend hundreds of hours perfecting a build that they had to cobble together based off of a rule set. And it just makes life much easier and more fun because now it's less of a job and more of a hobby. Here comes the Axial Coyote, right? This is a new truck that Axial just dropped, and it's really a base camp on steroids. One of the trucks that we're adding to the basic class, which is why I tell all of this backstory, it's one of the trucks we're adding to the basic class, and this last Sunday, so yesterday, this is Monday, yesterday I had a cash days, and I was able to run the Coyote. I personally ran this truck, and then Chaz, also ran this truck. Chaz went first, and I went second, and we scored very close to the same numbers. Chaz has been very busy, and so he hasn't had a whole lot of time to do a whole lot of crawling. So it kind of reflected in his score. So actually, I have the scores from the comp this weekend. Chaz went first. He scored a plus 84. It was a 10-gate course. There were 2 bonus gates, and nobody hit the bonus gates. They were probably a little wilder than they should have been, but kept everything fair and even, I guess. So he scored an 84. I scored a 38, and then only 2 people that ran anything but a stance are me and Chaz, and we ran this Coyote. Now, this Coyote has BBs in the front wheels, and that helped significantly. That was one of the keys to success in doing as well as I did. I think if I would have ran these stock wheels and tires, which are the Treps, and they are not G8 compound. I don't know what compound they are, maybe Predator. So if you look at most Proline tires, there's a little dot that with a color that signifies the compound. These don't have that, so I don't know what compound they are. But these are the stock wheels and tires for this truck here, right? And so If you take the stock wheels and tires on the Coyote and you run the Coyote in any sort of competition, you're not going to do very well right out of the box for a variety of reasons, and we'll go into those in a minute. And then these are the stock wheels and tires that come on the stance. So the irony is that these tires are labeled as 4.9 and these tires are labeled as 4.75. Now, I will let the competitors run the stock wheels and tires and stock tires. You can change out the wheels if you can deglue these. These are actually two-piece wheels, and so you can take these apart and reuse the foam and the tire off of it. These are glued though, so you have to figure out a way to deglue them to put them on different wheels. You can run these stock tires on this truck and you can run these stock tires on this truck. You cannot switch them because that is really the point behind the basic class, is to bring in trucks and run them with what they came from the factory with. The Coyote did not do as good as I had anticipated. I really wanted it to do better, but it did exceptional for what upgrades it has. All right, before I get too deep down the comparison rabbit hole, there was one thing that I wanted to mention with the rules. So we went over the three primary rules. There's no adding to or subtracting from the truck. Now, where this becomes more of a gray area are the shocks and springs. So I haven't really put any restrictions there. Nobody's really made any major changes, but there are two primary differences. So the Vanquish stance shocks and springs have a spring that's adjustable, spring rate, and then the Axial does not. It has the SCX10 Pro shocks on there, or clones if you will, with plastic bodies, and the spring rate isn't adjustable, so you have to change the spring out. So I will have to further refine the rules at some point to promote the tuning or tweaking of shock, oil, and or spring rate. I don't know how I'm going to do that. I think mini T springs fit in here, so if you want to run those you can. Otherwise, it is what it is. So jumping into the comparison, we already touched on wheels and tires. 4.75s, not really. These are more like 5-inch tires. These are closer to 4.75. We do have some 4.75 crawlers on here, and then I think these are 4.75 swampers. You can see the swampers are actually shorter slightly than the crawlers, but it doesn't really matter a whole lot. So the first thing I want to talk about is the bodies. As we saw, let's go ahead and take a weight of the bodies here. The first body we're going to weigh is the Vanquish stance. And the Vanquish stance body is 0.243 pounds, which is significantly heavier, or almost double the weight of this Axial body. This Axial body is 0.452. That means that this body is almost 47% heavier than this body. So I would lose 47% of the body weight alone just switching from this to this. But here's the problem. In the basic class, you can't actually do that. You can't manipulate the truck at all. So you couldn't remove these super heavy clipless systems in order to save that weight. So you're required to run it. So really the only way to save weight in that department is not. You're gonna have to offset this top heavy weight with the wheel weight. So there's a pretty good comparison about the bodies. Neither one of them is better than the other. Really the advantage with the stance body is that it is a pin design where you have body posts that go through the body and you put body clips in them. Whereas the Axial has a clipless body and yeah, it's heavier. It's 47% heavier. That's the first major comparison. All right, so we talked about the bodies. Let's move into the rest of the truck. Wheels and tires, we've already talked about those. Pretty big differences between the two. The really big difference here is that the Vanquish wheels are two-piece wheels and they're not glued, and the Axial ones are glued. The tires themselves, the Vanquish tires compound is really too soft for how thin the carcass is. These tires don't do very good, as a matter of fact. I'm sure you can find these for almost free all over Facebook. The inserts inside of these tires are awesome, so I would highly encourage you to utilize those. They're dual stage foams in these tires, or the inserts themselves. And yeah, I don't like plastic wheels. I advise people to go away from or not use the plastic wheels because this hex will get rounded out inside of there. As you can see, Now for the Axial wheels and tires, it's unfortunate because this is a one-piece wheel, meaning that this tire is glued to this wheel, which sucks because the tire is actually a good tire, and so is the insert inside of it. It does have a dual stage insert in it, and just like the Vanquish, but we have the downside of having the glued wheels. And just like with the Vanquish wheels, they're plastic, so I would recommend changing them out almost immediately. Moving into the trucks themselves, these are really worlds apart, right? They're supposed to be for the same style of thing, Class 2 competition according to the Sorka rules, which nobody's really using anymore, but they're using variants. I think the East Coast is still heavily dependent on Sorka because most of the people reside there, and then the West Coast has dialects of Sorka. The Midwest, we don't really use them at all. We have a couple of events, at least in Kansas, Missouri, Oklahoma. We have some events that utilize a version of Sorka rules, but it's really not even close. So the trucks are they're different leagues, right? In the Axial truck, you have a C-channel chassis, meaning the chassis emulates a real truck and it has a C-channel frame. The Vanquish has a flat rail chassis, meaning that it's just a piece of flat aluminum that's cut out and utilized there. Outside of that, the skid on the Vanquish is at a 6 degree angle, meaning that you can see that it's not flat. It actually is 6 degrees pointed this way, right here. Whereas on the Axial, this is essentially a base camp and it has a flat skid. The reason that you want an angled skid is for breakovers, and it works very well. So once you have a rock on the skid, it's more apt to slide off of that rock than it is to stick there because of the angled skid. Whereas the Axial doesn't really have that. There's really 3 other major areas that I want to highlight between these 2 trucks that make a major difference. The first area is the portal hubs. So you can see on the Vanquish, the hub actually comes from the factory with a weight on the outer portal cover, right? The hub cover, if you will. Portal hub cover. I don't know. Anyway, from the factory, there is a centered weight there. So I remember when the VRD first came out, Brandon on the live stream, I think, said that they were entertaining the idea of either adding a brushless motor to it, like the Ascent Fusion, or adding the weights to the front. And the more that they played with the truck, they realized that the weights would make the biggest impact for the money. Now, I assume that if they had to add the brushless motor, it probably would have increased the price from $499 to probably $550. And so being able to make the centered weights up front, cut costs, and also delivered performance. So most people are going to change out the motor, ESC, and servo anyway. So it's pretty easy to stuff cheap stuff in there. Now on the Axial, you don't get that. You don't get a good motor, ESC, servo, or weights in the front. But you do get a $150 less price tag. At the $499 mark for the Stance versus the $350 mark for the Ascent, you're buying wheels and tires for both of them. So we're going to say that the wheels and tires are probably going to cost you around $150. All said and done, taxes, shipping, things like that. The wheels are going to cost you roughly $50 to $70, and the tires are going to cost you about the same, $60 to $75, or $60 to $80 really. A set of tires in 2 from Proline, J Concepts, whatever, is about $30 to $35. So between tax and shipping, you're easily at the $80 range just for a set of tires. Then if you want to get a set of inserts that don't come with the tires, you know, like the SL3D inserts, which is what I would purchase, you're looking at another $40 to $65 without tax and shipping just for the inserts. So you could be $200 into wheels and tires having cheap wheels, and you're going to want good tires and inserts. For simplicity's sake, we're going to say all of that's going to cost you around $200. So wheels and tires for this with the total is around the $550 mark. So, that's before taxes and things like that on the truck itself. Wheels and tires for the Stance is going to put you around the $700 mark. So you still have roughly $150 to spend on the Axial to bring it up to the Stance level. But for my basic class, that's going to be really hard to do because there's not much you can do to the truck to make it better in terms of performing in that class with those rules. And that's where the big difference lies between the 2 trucks with the portal weights in the front. The Axial didn't come with portal weights, and so part of that $150, you're probably going to have to purchase some sort of weight for the front axle to offset the difference in body weight. Now, the second major difference between the two is the motor placement. The motor placement on the Axial is really high and it's in the middle of the truck, whereas the motor placement on the stance is really low and it's in the forward center of the truck. It's right here. And so it's actually very close to being at or under the chassis, whereas the Axial here, the motor is above the chassis, and that's not where you want that weight. That's really the second big difference. And then the third big difference, and this is probably the biggest difference and the biggest drawback to the Axial, is the servo placement. The servo placement on the Axial is on the chassis, whereas the servo placement on the stance or Vanquish is on the axle. Now, you're probably thinking that's not a huge difference, and I'm going to tell you that it is. The reason for that is you are getting more articulation because the Vanquish is 4-linked instead of 3-linked with a panhard bar, so you got the track bar here. That is a huge deal, right? You have more articulation in the stance, and then you also have less sprung weight with the stance. So I don't have a servo sitting on the chassis, which in turn is sitting on the springs, which is sprung weight. On the Axial, you have that servo sitting on the chassis, sitting on the springs, which is sprung weight. And again, the primary difference here is that if you look at this and this truck unloads, right? It unloads. You don't have a ton of weight up top here to pull the truck back. Whereas the Axial, on the other hand, it works against you. So not only do you have the servo on the chassis, but you have the heavy body, and if it unloads, it's going to pull the truck back or want to pull the truck back. Even with the heavy inserts in them with BBs, this still was not competitive against the stance. As a matter of fact, I scored a plus 38 with this truck, and the guy that won, Josh, congratulations by the way, Josh, he actually scored a -1. He got first place with my stance. Unfortunately, I didn't get any footage of it. Running a competition, especially with 3 classes, and trying to get film footage is just not really possible. So, huge shout out to everyone that came out, helped set up the courses, tear the courses down. Jackson, Jacob, the Curry brothers, and then Springer, you know who you are, JC's Off-Road. Everybody that puts in, Scott and Mark, huge shout out to all you guys. Doesn't go unnoticed for me. It's just part of it. And it doesn't allow me to film and run the competition at the same time. So I wasn't able to get footage of this run versus that. I will, however, put some footage of that in this video, which is what we're going to do here shortly. Once I get done talking about the trucks. Those are the major differences between the 2 trucks. There are other small, slight differences as well, but they don't really mean anything in terms of performance. It's really just a matter of uniqueness. So now we're going to go hit the rocks and see which one is more capable than the other. All right, and we're out at the home course. So we're going to set up gates, these little blue gates here from Vanquish. A couple things before we get started. The first thing is both trucks are using the Z-Pack 1500. On the Vanquish, it's going to be on the slider. On the Axial Coyote, it's up front where the battery holder is. And then the other thing I want to talk about is the tires. So the wheels and tires are all the same inserts, all the same hubs, all the same clamp rings. No difference between any of them. The front tires on both trucks are Proline Crawler in Predator compound, and the rear tires are Proline Hyrax in G8 compound. Again, both trucks are exactly the same. So we're going to test the incline, we're going to test breakover, we're going to test side hill, and we're going to test downhill. Really all of the different options when competing, right? So you should have a mixture of all of these things in any course to make the course competitive, if you will. So let's jump into it. We have gate 1 directly ahead of us. We have measured it with the ruler. We're going to send the stance first since it is an older truck. We will alternate trucks with gates. So the next gate we will send the Coyote through first. But the stance had no problem there. Now right away I can tell you immediately that I don't have the steering angle on the Coyote that I do on the stance, so I had to take a reverse there. Oh, let's see if that front left will pull it up. That body is, oh, there we go. It's real heavy. Servo's also not as powerful on the Coyote as the stance. This is gate 2 right here, and we're gonna go down it. It is a very steep side hill, so like I said, we're gonna take the opportunity now that the stance went first. In gate 1, gate 2 is going to be the Coyote. And that was not very successful. We progressed the gate, but we hit the gate. So we also rolled in the process. Let's see what the stance does. Woo! Stance did the same thing. All right, so this next obstacle is a downhill. We're gonna start with the stance. The object here is to see if you can keep the truck planted and not come flipping over itself or back come over the front. It almost did, but we were able to save it there. All right, the Coyote's turn here. Ooh, I can tell you that the steering angle on the Coyote is not as good as the stance, and also the low control of the brushed motor is not as good either. The stance definitely has better low end control. Oh, yep. I tried to throttle out there. It did not throttle fast enough and fell over itself, so I don't know if that's a limitation of me, the truck, or both. So this is gate 4. You have a gate here and a gate down here. The idea is to go up it. It's super steep. We're going to see if either one of these trucks can do it. I have little hope that either one does, but we'll start with the Coyote and see what happens. I think we're gonna get that way. Moving the camera so we can actually see what's going on. The body's super heavy and it wants to lift real bad there. Attempt 1. Attempt 2. We'll try this other side again. Attempt 3. All right, let's move on to the stance. All right, so this is attempt 1. Well, we've made it further than this Coyote did. I don't have any kind of hope that we're going to make it at all, because this is pretty much a line-killing line. Yeah, we're not going to get it. So there it is. Let's take them inside and let's talk about what we just witnessed. We're back in the shop. We talked about the trucks. We ran the trucks. Unfortunately, I only got the 4 gates because I spent about 4 hours doing 8 gates yesterday. I went to edit the video today and that video was not there on the SD card. So I know I hit record. Not sure what the deal is. However, the outcome was still the same. There was no difference between the 4 hours of footage and the footage from today. Unfortunately, there's just not as many gates for you to see. Some things that I would like to hit on before I close this video out. We'll start with the price. $350, $500. Now, typically I would say the $350 machine would win. However, they're not really in the same category. So there's not a real winner here. This truck is a dedicated line killer right out of the box, one of the only ones available on the market. This is a relabeled base camp as a I don't even know what they're marketing it as, right? It doesn't fit any category but the trail or class 1 category. So for the price, I mean, you're going to have to spend probably a lot more than $150 to make this truck competitive with this truck. Really depends on what you're doing, right? If you're competing in like my basic class, you really can't spend much on this to make it competitive with this. I mean, you're going to buy this, put probably heavy wheels and tires on it, and then maybe do some shock tuning, and that's about the extent of it. You're not really going to have any advantage there. So yeah, the price is kind of a moot point. For the money, I would choose the Stance for competing in class 2 or my basic class. However, I would choose the Axial Coyote here for a trail build or a class 1 build because it's already suited for class 1 with its flat skid. These are really two different trucks, right? I mean, comparing them is not very fair. The next point is the track width on the Coyote is narrower than the track width on the Stance, which actually hurts it quite a bit. The wheelbase is shorter on the Coyote than it is the Stance, which again hurts it. Not a ton, but it still hurts it. I think this is 12.6, this is 12.3. The axles are actually longer on the Vanquish than they are on the Coyote. Side by side, I mean, you're looking at like a ½ inch difference there at least. So, you know, it's no wonder the Stance did so much better in the gates than the Coyote did. Some other reasons for that are the body weight. I mean, there's just so much weight above the chassis on the Coyote that it's just not conducive for any type of class 2 or competition crawling, right? Any kind of extreme crawling, you're just not going to be very happy with it outside the box. You could add a bunch of weight to the bottom. You could make it work. But by the time it's all said and done, you'll probably have just as much or more money in this truck than you do this truck. So, you know, at what point do you buy this truck over this truck? Again, I think looking at it, they both have really the same motor and ESC. Both of them are 35 turn. The gearing in the Coyote is less desirable than the gearing in the Stance because the Stance actually has more slow controlled crawl with the brushed motor, whereas the Coyote doesn't. It's a lot harder. The servos are about the same. I think that the Coyote servo starts to really heat up and lose its power faster than the Stance. That's pretty typical. Servo in the Stance is less than adequate as well, but it does get the job done. I do like the shocks better on the Coyote than I do the Stance, and that's really about the only thing that I can say is better about the Coyote is the the shocks, right? This is a Gen 3 Stance. Vanquish has updated the shock seal O-rings, if you will, and they're supposed to be better. They didn't come on this truck, but I do have some of the kits to put on the Origin that I have and hopefully fix the shocks from leaking there. And that's really one of the big downsides to the Stance is that the shocks leak. Outside of that, Vanquish did fix the center diffs. They now come with machine diffs, and they also have the good lower links, whereas before they were real thin. So for the $500, you're getting a very good bargain. You're going to put wheels and tires on it, and like I said, it'll be competitive right out of the box with just adding wheels and tires. This was a good attempt by Axial to bring something fresh to the market and try and be competitive, but at the end of the day, I think really what it's going to be good for is removing the Lexan body, throwing a hard body on there, and turning it into a scale / trail / class 1 truck. I'm going to put a big disclaimer at the end of this video. This is the end of the video, and this is the disclaimer. This is all my opinion, right? Now, you could see the footage and everything for yourselves. Drop a comment. Tell me if you agree or don't agree. It's not going to hurt my feelings at all. I know this is my opinion, and based off of how the trucks ran from me driving them, not just in the video from today, but I've probably got 2 packs through both trucks now between yesterday and today doing the same exact lines. And, you know, the geometry in the front's way better being 4-linked on the Stance than the 3-link is. I mean, that's just a limitation of the different geometries applied. 4-link versus 3-link. The 4-link will always outperform the 3-link. I don't care what anybody says, right? I mean, that's just how it's going to be because you have more articulation, you have no bump steer. You can see how when you lift the truck up, the axle moves or shifts from one side to the other. The Stance doesn't do that, right? It just goes straight up and down. I will say some very good things about both trucks. I love the axles on both trucks. I like that they're narrower on the Coyote than they are on the Stance. It gives you options. I love the design of the Axial axles. I don't know if they have the same exact turning the steering radius as the F10s do here on the Stance, but you're not losing much. Really, the limitation of these axles is, again, the 3-link setup. Overall, I'm very impressed with both trucks. Obviously, if I'm going to compete, I'm going to choose the Stance. However, for everything else, not competition-based, it's really crapshoot. It's probably going to be the Coyote for most people because of the price point, which is completely fine. There is nothing wrong with this truck. I would recommend both trucks. Just wouldn't recommend the Coyote for competition. With that being said, I'm going to call it here because this is probably going to be a long video. Huge shout out to all of you who made it this far. A special thanks to Jake's Adventure Garage Club members. And as always, we hope you have a great day.